Now I know you guys are probably going to look at the title, look at the date, and then look back at the title and be like, isn't it a little late to be talking about the games you played from 2 years ago? And the answer to that would be yes, and while I was originally going to point back to the name of this channel and say I run on my own time, bitch, I figured I owed you guys some kind of explanation. When I first started this channel almost 2 years ago, which is crazy to say out loud, I originally meant to drop the Kenna and Death's Door review in 2023 and end the year with the list of games I played in 2022. But as you can clearly see, none of that happened, and for a multitude of reasons. For one, making a YouTube video is a lot harder than it looks. Between playing the game, scripting, recording, and editing, that could be well over a week of work just for a 15-minute video. But also, 2023 was a difficult year for me due to personal reasons that I'm not gonna disclose here, because you came here for the funny sloth man, and not the depressed one. Now that we've gotten all that out the way, let's lay down the rules of engagement for this video. 1, as you can see, the title is games I played in 2023, meaning the game doesn't have to have come out in 2023, I just have to have played it or at least started playing it. 2, this isn't a top 10 list, so the order in which these games show up are not indicative of a ranking system, level of enjoyment, or even order played. And 3, don't expect me to go as in-depth as I normally do for the late reviews. There's too many games for that. Now that we've gotten all that out the way, let's finally get started by completely ignoring Rule 2 and start with the first new game that I played that year, Strangers of Paradise, which is a game that I originally got to serve as a distraction from the myriads of things that I was supposed to be doing at the time. But I didn't realize just how good it would be at just that. I ended up enjoying this game a lot more than I originally thought I would, which was a bit surprising due to the criticism surrounding its, well, let's just say interesting story. Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins, or SOPFFO for short, is an action RPG Souls-like made by Team Ninja, creator of the Nioh series, and while playing you can clearly see the bones of Nioh in its mission-based structure and its overall gameplay loop of going through a level, fighting a boss, and gearing up. But I still think this game has enough original ideas that help it stand out. The job system gives you access to multiple different playstyles, weapons, and special abilities, and since you get to run 2 jobs at the same time, it encourages you to experiment with multiple different job combinations. You're also encouraged to try out multiple jobs due to all the expert and advanced ones requiring you to level up 2 or 3 jobs to unlock them. At first I found this annoying because I had already found a few jobs that best fit how I wanted to play, but I ended up enjoying a lot of the jobs and weapons that I at first thought I wouldn't like. The game's combat centers around a break gauge that I think was also in Nioh, but it's utilized a bit differently here. For one, when you break the enemy's break gauge, you get to do a brutal finisher that increases your total MP, which allows you to use more of your special moves that do more damage to the enemy and their break gauge. Your break gauge also goes down when you take hits or block, and when broken leaves you open and unable to move. However, each job that you have equipped has its own break gauge, which again incentivizes players to keep changing their job in battle. I haven't even begun to scratch the surface of how deep this game's combat can get, and for the sake of time, I'm not gonna be able to. Although the combat in this game is damn good, it unfortunately has some of the same issues that plague other Team Ninja Souls-likes. The enemy variety is a lot to be desired, and by the time you reach the halfway point, you'll have seen all the enemies, making the latter points in this game a bit stale. Same for level design, as a lot of the times you'll be going through the same lifeless corridors. The game also throws a lot of loot at you, and I mean a lot of loot, which some might think is a good thing, but I found that it would often turn the game into an inventory management simulator. Now, is the story as bad as people say? Nah, not really. I think you guys are just mean. While yes, the dialogue can be a bit cringy, but I mean, as far as I know, a lot of Final Fantasy games have bad or unnatural sounding dialogue, which I can accept because this game is clearly not taking itself that seriously. I mean, look at this. You can't see this and tell me they didn't do this shit on purpose.
Bullshit.
Even with this, the story was good enough to keep me engaged and even had some heartfelt and sad moments. But at the end of the day, who really gives a fuck about the story when you can do cool shit like this? That's why we play action games. To do cool shit, everything else be damned. And if you want to do some really cool shit, look no further than Midnight Fight Express. A game where you're constantly doing cool shit, right from the jump, so much so it makes you feel like you're in a movie. Midnight Fight Express is a 3D beat 'em up, which is a genre you wouldn't expect to be used in the same sentence as a movie game, but just bear with me. When you think of a game that feels like a movie, you probably think of a more cinematic gaming experience, with a heavy emphasis on story, so games like The Last of Us, Death Stranding, and any Telltale game. And while yes, narratively these games are definitely as close to a movie as a game can get, the moment-to-moment gameplay is anything but. Here, however, the moment you start the game, you feel like an action movie star, and I'm not alone in feeling this way. If you look at a lot of the reviews for this game, a lot of people compare it to John Wick, or say it makes you feel like John Wick, which is a comparison that I understand with the game's gangster aesthetic and electronic rock soundtrack. I don't know, I'm not sure on the genre. However, I don't fully agree with this comparison, mainly because this game isn't centered too much around gunplay. Instead, I would compare this game more to an Indonesian action movie. Specifically, The Night Comes For Us, due to its gritty hand-to-hand action. Throughout this game, you will punch, kick, throw, stab, beat, and concuss your way through countless hordes of enemies, requiring constant movement while also using the environment and their weapons to your advantage as you make your way through each level. Now, you might think that after a while this game would get stale, and you're wrong. Not only does each mission add some variety to the gameplay loop by adding new enemies that are sometimes unique to that level, but the game also does a great job in adding new gameplay elements and mechanics in certain missions, like the rope gun, the bike chase scene, and some others that I won't spoil. Also, after each level, you gain skill points that you can use to unlock new moves like parries, environmental takedowns, and throws, and you're incentivized to use all these moves by a scoring system that grades how well you did throughout the level and how well you used all the tools at your disposal. The story was also a surprising bright spot as well, since I had originally thought it was going to be just good enough to serve as a driver for the player without having you invested in anything. However, there was a decent mystery to be solved with plot twists that I admittedly saw coming, but were still interesting to see unfold. There were also a bunch of pop culture references and Easter eggs that were fun to notice, like Fight Club, which makes sense, Call of Duty's No Russian, and Sons of Anarchy. But unfortunately, the game isn't perfect. Although I just praised it for the amount of moves you unlock, I found that there was a lot of overlap with the button inputs that would cause me to throw out a different move from the one I intended. Also, the shooting, although fun when it worked, felt a bit too awkward to be happy with since the reticle was so small it would only pop up when you were locked onto a target, which caused me to miss multiple shots. Even with that, I highly recommend you give this game a try. It's not long, and with it being mission-based and most missions being pretty short, makes this a great pick-up and play game, which is a type of game I think is important in the sea of long games that have multiple different systems and gameplay mechanics to engage with. Games like Wo Long Fallen Dynasty, which was the first new game I played in 2023, and is one that I feel like everyone quickly forgot about. With Lords of the Fallen and Lies of P hogging all the Souls-like excitement, and the game releasing at the beginning of an admittedly stacked year for gaming, Wo Long kinda got lost in the sauce of 2023, which is a shame because I think this is Team Ninja at their best. Wo Long wears its Sekiro inspiration proudly through its fast-paced parry-centric combat that takes a lot of what they learned from their previous SOP FFO likes. Like Strangers of Paradise with its break gauge, and the Nero series with its guardian spirits and magic systems. But their implementation here is slightly different. Your spirit gauge is split into two halves. The orange half increases when you take damage, guard, or dodge, and when broken leaves you wide the fuck open. The only way to decrease your negative spirit buildup is through attacking or parrying enemies. This causes your orange spirit to be converted into blue spirit, which powers up your heavy attacks with ki, causing you to do more damage to enemies and their spirit, as well as lowering their spirit gauge entirely. This along with a parry system that not only feels very smooth and intuitive, but also allows you to parry any and everything. Sword slash, parry. Projectile, parry. Grab, parry. The fucking wind, also fucking parry. Parrying the enemy's red key attacks gives you a pretty decent window to counter and lowers the enemy's spirit bar, at least until you hit them with a critical attack. This promotes an aggressive in-your-face type of playstyle as you're always trying to keep your blue spirit bar up while keeping the enemy spirit down, making combat fast-paced. To add to your arsenal, you have multiple different spells like throwing fireballs, imbuing your weapons with lightning, etc. You also have divine beasts that you can summon onto the battlefield to add some type of effect, like summoning firestorms or healing you and your allies. The bosses in this game are okay. There's a decent variety in type of boss that keeps the game from getting stale. The difficulty, however, is pretty hit or miss. You sometimes have a boss like Lu Bu, one that took me like 2 days to beat, to a boss you can easily beat through spamming. No higher brain function required. Now, while I do think Wo Long is Team Ninja's best Souls-like thus far, it still, however, holds some of the same sins as their other games. Enemy variety is still very lacking, and by halfway through you fought all the basic enemies except for maybe one. This is also the same for level design. I even think they ripped a level straight out of Strangers of Paradise. The same goes for the story being kind of weak, cause although it gives a supernatural retelling of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is one of my favorite times in history, mostly due to the Dynasty Warriors franchise, your character feels more along for the ride rather than an impactful force. Also, for some godforsaken reason, the parry button is the same as your dodge button, so there'll be times I would try to parry multiple moves back to back, but would end up dodging and getting my ass slapped instead. But one major criticism I constantly saw levied towards this game is that it had too many underexplained gameplay systems. And, I mean, I guess? Most systems that are important are explained well, like the parry system and the morale system, which serves as a pseudo overall level. When an enemy morale rank is higher than yours, they do more physical and spiritual damage to you. and vice versa. You can temporarily increase this rank by killing enemies, but these rank levels will go down once you die. To permanently increase your rank throughout the level, you place up banners all around the map. This is explained right at the beginning of the game, and even if you don't explore and find all the minor banners and just get the main banners, this will have your morale rank at a good enough level to fight the boss. So I say all this to say that this system is basically engaged in by default. As for gear, I've never really been one to care about min-maxing my stats or creating some type of build because seeing a stat go from 0.4 to 0.42 doesn't do anything for me. So you'll be fine just wearing whatever is high enough level or just wear whatever looks cool and level it up. Look, the only system you have to engage with to be successful is just the basic combat system, nothing else. And since when did a game giving you a lot of gameplay options become a bad thing? Look, I've been talking about this game for way too long, so I'll just leave it with this. If you like fast-paced action Souls-like combat that is challenging, give this game a try. Well, I don't know if I'd describe this game as challenging. Yeah, there were a few difficult bosses, but most of the regular enemies were pretty easy to beat. So the game was hard, but nowhere near as hard as MoonScars, which is crazy to say because the version I played was way easier than the version that was out at launch. MoonScars is a 2D pixel art Metroidvania released in September 2021 that, if you played at launch, has many gameplay systems that are completely different now. For one, the Blood Moons, a system that after a certain number of deaths, the moon becomes red, making enemies stronger and do more damage, while also increasing the amount of bone powder, your currency, you receive, essentially adding a level of risk versus reward. At launch, however, Blood Moons would trigger after every single death, which sounds extremely tedious since the amount of extra bone powder you received was negligible. You can get rid of this by using a gland, but it's a very rare type of currency, so you often want to hold on to it. And with the amount of extra bone powder you get being so minimal, I honestly couldn't imagine playing this game like that, especially since it's made with the thought that you're going to be dying a lot with some of its Souls-like elements. Like the mirror system that functions as this game's version of bonfires, which at launch, when accessing the workshop, your hub world, originally would forcefully cast your mode, creating a doppelganger that you would have to fight on return every time you accessed the workshop, which doesn't even sound hard, just fucking tedious. Thankfully, now, this only happens when accessing a mirror essential for pushing the plot forward. If this game still had implemented these systems in the same way, I honestly probably wouldn't have beaten it or enjoyed it enough to put it on this list. Yeah, plot twist motherfucker, I actually enjoyed this game. Combat was not only fluid, but also impactful, with a lot of crisp animations and a parry that sound and felt epic as fuck to pull off. In combat, you have your regular attack and a special attack that also gives you an attribute boost based on whatever secondary weapon you have selected. You also have witchery, spells that have a lot of effects like doing damage or creating a clone that will fight with you. All of this keeps combat fun and allows for you to have multiple different playstyles. That, along with gemstones, equipped items that give you some bonus, usually with some sort of trade-off, like increased witchery damage but increased mana cost, or increased physical damage at the cost of witchery power, and spite, random stackable bonuses that increase your stats, like healing percentage and crit chance, that go away when you die, gives you the freedom to create builds that cater to the way that you want to play. But unfortunately, there still are some issues with the game. One is the game's unnatural sexual attraction with flying enemies. Damn near every fight has multiple flying enemies that are annoying to deal with due to this game not having any type of reliable air combo. You can hit in the air like twice before falling to the ground, making it difficult to hit the flying fuckers that just keep moving. And some of them even heal themselves and any other enemy that is near. There is one witchery that does a good job at handling flying enemies, but this isn't a good solution to me since it requires the use of one of your 2 witchery slots on it. And although some of the other witcheries could hit them, it doesn't hit consistently to warrant the use. Hey, editing procrastinator here. Upon review, that really isn't an issue. Not at all. It's not a problem, bro. I was bitching. I was just bitching. That's my bad. Also, there were a few times when I had no clue as to what I was supposed to do in a certain area. There was no type of direction or indication of what I was supposed to do, so truthfully, I had to look it up. But except for this one time, the game does a good job at making sure you know what to do. Now, you might be wondering how the story was, and honestly, me too, because the story falls into the Dark Souls level of crypticness and proper noun usage. All I know is that you play as Grey Irma, a pristine created by the sculptor, and after a war between Claibornes, you awake confused and with memory loss as you search for the sculptor. That's all you're getting out of me, because that's all I can explain without this video being longer than it already is. If you really want to know, just look it up. Even with its shortcomings, MoonScars was an enjoyable experience, which was supposed to be my first full foray into the Metroidvania genre, and I would recommend it to anyone. I only wish there was a way to experience the game in its original messed up form, if only for the shits and the gigs. Now, all the 2 attentive people in the audience that are still watching might have heard me say that this game was supposed to be my first full foray into the Metroidvania genre. I say supposed to because my first actual foray into the genre was in Afterimage, which was another game that I got as a distraction from my responsibilities, specifically due to its beautiful art style as well as its combat that looked fast-paced, engaging, and fun. Unfortunately, the saying that looks can be deceiving was created for a reason, because I did not enjoy this game at all. I'm sorry, I know this game reviewed relatively well, but it was just not doing it for me. For one, the combat felt very repetitive, with most of the weapons consisting of the same few hit combos. Enemies often felt spongy to deal with, and for some reason would do damage to you just by touching you. And a lot of the cooler moves required you leveling up a skill tree decently far just to get some basic attack that you probably already should have. Honestly, I probably could have forgiven most of this and adapted to it if the game's story was just interesting. The game kinda starts abruptly with the characters talking about some battle rather than letting us play it, or at least see it in the cutscene before. Instead, the cutscene was filled with cryptic dialogue that even at the 8 to 9 hour mark still remained unexplained. This, coupled with the game's baffling combat, led to me dropping it not even halfway through, which a lot of people consider to be a sin in gaming, and I'm here to tell you that's bullshit. This hobby is meant to be fun, and if you're not having fun playing a game, you shouldn't have to force yourself to finish it, even if the game is highly touted. Different strokes for different folks, and you shouldn't feel bad for a game not clicking with you. There are quite literally tons of other games you can play to fill your time. Now, what you should feel bad about is if you haven't gotten to play Spider-Man 2. Okay, I'm being facetious. Making these transitions flow is a lot harder than it looks. Or, I guess, sounds. Anyway, Spider-Man 2, the prodigal son, the savior of the gaming industry, the true game of the year of 2023. So I typically don't get involved when it comes to gaming drama, and since I only played like 2 of the Game of the Year candidates for that year, I'm not gonna give my opinion on if I think Spider-Man 2 should have won Game of the Year for that year. But if I was giving my opinion, I'm sorry, Spider-Man 2 just isn't. Now, don't get me wrong, Spider-Man 2 is a good game. A damn good game. For one, the game looks amazing, no pun intended, and swinging, flipping, and gliding through the city as the Spider-Man felt so good that I never bothered using the fast travel system. But I don't think this game improves much from its previous entries. If you've played Spider-Man 1 or Miles Morales, you've essentially already played Spider-Man 2. The combat is basically the same between the 3 games, except here you're missing a lot of the gadgets from the first one. Not only does this limit the combat, but it also has an effect on stealth, as well. A lot of the removed gadgets were great for stealth, like web bombs and trip mines, which honestly leaves stealth feeling a bit lacking. And the gadgets left are more for direct combat. This was probably due to the new special abilities that both Miles and Peter have, which are all designed for, again, direct combat. They each have 8 different abilities, but each of these abilities kind of fill the same role as the other. One does better damage to single targets, another is a launcher, one is a dash type of attack, and the last is typically an AoE. And other than a parry that is admittedly fun as fuck to use, and an ultimate that I'm pretty sure wasn't in the other games, don't quote me on that though, there isn't a lot to differentiate this game from the last 2, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Even with all that being said, the game is still good. The combat, although not doing anything revolutionary, is very fun, and the story not only had some really good set pieces, but also was engaging all the way through. Even with the Mary Jane Solid missions, which were annoying because I'd rather be playing as one of the Spider-Men, but wasn't that bad as I even had some fun during a few of them. Since I'm talking about the story, let me discuss a few points that fell short for me. One, I think Miles is pretty underutilized for a good portion of the story. The missions you do with him during the first half of the story have nothing to do with the overall plot, and while cool and do flesh out the world and his character, I wish it could have worked towards the plot too. Because when you're having the big final fight of the game, Peter and Venom are having great moments. Then there's Miles, who never really directly interacted with him, so it feels like he's just kinda there. The same goes for Kraven, as I didn't like how he was treated. The game hypes him up to be this huge threat, but you only ever directly fight him once, which was disappointing. I think adding in at least one more fight with him where Peter gets thrashed or barely escapes would make Kraven feel more threatening, and also would be another reason why Peter feels as if he needs the symbiote. But hey, what do I know? Venom's fight was cool though. In the end, this is still a game that I highly recommend for people to try, even if it falls short in some respects that keep it from being Game of the Year for 2023. And unfortunately, I can't even make it my personal Game of the Year for 2023 either, because that title goes to Have a Nice Death. Welcome to the Afterlife. Which is a game that I completely forgot was coming out that year until I randomly saw it while perusing the Xbox store. But it was one I was always interested in ever since I saw the first announcement trailer in, I believe, 2022? This was due to smooth combat and the creative character design and setting, and in those aspects, the game did not disappoint. Controlling Death feels smooth and snappy, and although his base moveset is a bit limited, the sub-weapons and magic that you randomly find throughout the level give Death a lot more versatility. And having the game take place in a corporation where Death is the CEO and each department being a different way that people die is not only really creative, but plays into the game being a roguelike, as each procedurally generated level takes place in one of these departments, with the final boss of that level being the head of the section of the company. I mentioned that this game is a roguelike, which was the first game of this genre I had ever played, but luckily this game does a pretty decent job at teaching some of the defining elements of what a roguelike is. Curses are your random ability and power-ups that can completely change how you play and how effective you are in combat. The same goes for weapons and magic, which can completely alter a run with how strong and broken some are. Each floor or stage is typically randomly generated down to enemy placement and items, but where Have a Nice Death differs is by allowing you to pick what reward you'll get at the end of each floor, which gives you a bit more control over how a run will turn out. But the mechanic that took me the longest to get used to was the fact that every death restarts you from the beginning of the game, taking away any of the curses, magics, and weapons you've acquired. At first I thought this wasn't going to be that big of a problem, but when I had racked up 25 plus hours and still hadn't made it past the second fucking boss, I began to reassess. And not gonna lie, I crashed out a bit, leading to me almost dropping the game. But it was within that crash out where the game began to click for me. Each death or failure was helping me figure out which weapons, magics, and curses best fit my playstyle, as well as enemy and bosses' movesets. But most importantly, I figured out that it's okay to suck. Cause it's through that sucking that you improve, and as someone who typically wants to be really good at something the moment I pick it up or try it, this is something that I needed to be reminded of. Not just in video games, but with this channel as well. Alright, let's get real for a second. A lot of the times I would often find myself disheartened at the fact that my videos weren't the most well put together, or the fact that the channel still hasn't gotten much traction. But that's part of the game. The only way to get better at this, or to get better at anything, is to do it. And of course if it's your first time doing something, you're gonna suck. And you're gonna suck for a while. But it's through that sucking that you learn what works for you and how to improve. Which is something I've always known, but I guess I needed a goofy game about Death the CEO trying to fix his company to remind me of that. I know I've barely spoken about the story or the actual game, but that was on purpose because I implore you to please give this game a chance. It's fun, rather addicting, and has a lot of character and charm. And before you ask, no, I'm not expecting you to have the same life-changing epiphany that I had. And I already know that you're probably thinking that a video game should not be the thing that sparks such a realization. And hey, maybe you're right. Maybe I just take this gaming shit a bit too seriously.